A little while ago, I made a video talking about Ken Penders and how insane that guy is. But in doing that, it did bring me down memory lane as I looked into the Archie Sonic comics again, and like most, I'm a sucker for Scourge. Honestly, I'm a sucker for any kind of what-if alternate dimension story, whether it be Sonic if he was more selfish and greedy, or stuff like Dark Knight's Metal where you get a ton of creepy versions of Batman, or that one Batman story where Batman and Catwoman swap places and for some reason Alfred is replaced by a Playboy model named Brooks. But this video isn't about that mess. There's a lot that can be said, not only about Scourge, but about the entire Archie Sonic Comics universe. But for this video, I'd like to keep it focused just on Scourge. And although I won't be going super in depth into everything that's happened with him, I think I'm going to cover most things surrounding him pretty well to give you an idea of who he is. So, for starters, before changing his name to Scourge, Scourge more or less just looked like Sonic. And for consistency, I'm going to be referring to him as Anti-Sonic when I talk about him during his time before becoming Scourge, just so there's no confusion. Anti-Sonic, like Sonic, lives on the planet Mobius. However, unlike Sonic's Mobius, this Mobius is spelled with an E, and I never knew if it was supposed to be pronounced the same, or if it's pronounced more like Moe, which, oh god, I hope it's not pronounced like Moe, because I am not ready for a Moe Sonic universe. So, just to keep it simple, I'm going to call it Anti-Mobius. An additional difference is, whereas Mobius dealt with an event called the Great War, which would lead to Sonic's dad Jules being roboticized, Anti-Sonic experienced an event in his world known as the Great Peace, a time which Anti-Jules unified Anti-Mobius under their version of King Max. But in doing so, he didn't really have any time for his son, and he wasn't that great of a father. Without the Great War leading Anti-Sonic down a path of becoming a freedom fighter, like his Prime Universe counterpart, Anti-Sonic evolved into a much more selfish and angry version of himself, which would eventually lead to it being implied that he murdered his father and went on to overthrow the king. Sonic would eventually find himself in Anti-Mobius, where he would meet his counterpart, who still looked very much like him, but with the added addition of a leather jacket, sunglasses, and leather boots, which sounds like a nightmare to run in, but he pulls it off. With the help of Anti-Mobius's anti-Robotnik, Dr. Ivo Kintobor, Sonic manages to beat Anti-Sonic and return to his own world. Anti-Sonic would reappear a number of times after this, as he aided Robotnik in a number of different schemes that involved him and his anti-freedom fighters to impersonate their prime counterparts. But for this video, I'm not going to go too in depth into that area, as it doesn't really add much relevance to Scourge's overall story. Anti-Sonic would reappear much later, now with a slight redesign to his clothes, but still looking a good deal like Sonic. This time Anti-Sonic would go on to attempting to pull off a heist with Rouge the Bat, where they would attempt to steal the Master Emerald on what would be both Anti-Sonic and Sonic's birthday. While Rouge was preoccupied fighting Locke, the current guardian of the Master Emerald, Anti-Sonic went on to double-cross Rouge as he attempted to use the Master Emerald to turn himself super. This was, however, interrupted by Locke, who punched Anti-Sonic mid-transformation, leaving him green and with those two scars on his chest from Locke's pointy knuckles. From this point on, Anti-Sonic would change his name to Scourge, and this is where we go from the Anti-Sonic character onto the Scourge character. Scourge and Rouge would then shortly find themselves fighting against Sonic and his friends. With both of them outnumbered, it was only a matter of time before they were apprehended, but thanks to a warp ring suddenly appearing, both Scourge and Rouge managed to escape. Once on the other side of the ring, Scourge and Rouge would meet Dr. Fenitivus, who had rescued them. Honestly, you could probably do an entire video on Dr. Fenitivus, and because of the amount of stuff surrounding him, I'm gonna keep this simple so that it doesn't muddy the waters when talking about Scourge. Basically, Dr. Fenitivus is a reoccurring villain in the Archie Sonic comics, and in this moment he would go on to recruiting Scourge temporarily. Scourge would also go on to work with a group of villains known as the Destructics, where he would meet his future romantic partner Fiona Fox, who was a big fan of his overall evil aesthetic and used to date Sonic. Once back on Anti-Mobius, Scourge would go on to taking the throne again, and he began to form a plot to take over Mobius Prime, with his Suppression Squad, the group of people who I had been formerly referring to as the Anti-Freedom Fighters, and of course Fiona, who had joined him as well. By repairing a pair of broken star posts, Scourge managed to build a portal which reconnected him to the Prime Universe. Fortunately for the Suppression Squad, when they arrived into the Prime Universe, Sonic was away with Knuckles and the Chaotix as they fought against the Dark Legion in New Megalopolis. The Freedom Fighters struggled against the Suppression Squad, but luckily Sonic did manage to rush back just in time to help them, only for Scourge to then appear through the portal. The group would go on to fighting each other, but ultimately Scourge and his Suppression Squad forced the Freedom Fighters to retreat from their base. thus leaving the Suppression Squad to take over the Freedom Fighters HQ. Days later, while still at the Freedom Fighters HQ, Scourge would find himself attacked by Metal Sonic, and Miles would go on to convince him to fight it on his own without the help from the Suppression Squad. On top of that, to make matters worse for him, Sonic also arrived with the intentions of beating Scourge in order to take back the base. Sonic attempted to work out a temporary truce, however, with Scourge in order to beat Metal Sonic, but Scourge declined and instead opted to fight the both of them at once. While fighting, Scourge pulled a Darth Vader and asked Sonic to join him in an opportunity to take over not only Mobius, but rule the multiverse together. That's right, the Archie Sonic Comics has an entire multiverse going on, not just these two universes, so eat your heart out, Marvel. During this encounter, Metal Scourge also shows up, which I feel should be mentioned just because he looks really cool, but ultimately, he doesn't really add anything aside from having a cool design. Scourge and Sonic take on their two metal counterparts, but ultimately Scourge has to ask his Suppression Squad to help them dispose of their metal doppelgangers. Before Sonic can leave, Scourge points out that he had not answered the question that he had posed. However, of course, Sonic turns him down, as multiverse domination isn't really his jam. But after this fight, Sonic decides not to attempt to take back his HQ and instead leaves once again. Later that night, Scourge attempts to attack Sonic in his sleep, only to be greeted by Sonic's still roboticized father, who's no longer mind-controlled. Scourge and Jules exchange words, and ultimately, Scourge ends up being convinced to leave without any conflict. As he leaves, tears form in his eyes, and he departs into the night. Unfortunately, things from here only get worse for Scourge, as his Suppression Squad turn on him by joining forces with the Freedom Fighters to take him out. However, this team-up is rather short-lived, as this double cross against Scourge turns into a triple cross once the Suppression Squad knocks Sonic and Amy back into Anti-Mobius along with Scourge. There, the group meet my favorite Anti-Mobius character, Rosie the Rascal. Just a really quick aside here, but she's such a fun character to me. Whereas everybody else is just kind of like an evil counterpart, which feels rather generic, Rosie the Rascal is more like what if Amy just absolutely snapped and went full on insane, not only wanting to stalk Sonic, but also wanting to crush his head with her hammer. Not to mention the name and design come from her appearance in Sonic CD, and I'm always down to see more of that look. But back to Scourge. While the duo both avoid fighting Rosie and attempt to fight off Scourge, Shadow ends up teleporting in and momentarily aids in this fight. However, shortly after, as in 3 panels later, Metal Sonic also teleports in, and if that's not enough teleporting for you, both Silver and Rob O'Hedge, Amy's cousin, they also show up through a warp ring. Not to get too sidetracked, but basically Silver is trying to hunt down Sonic, and Rob is helping him without knowing that he wants to kill Sonic. Overall, things at this point in the story are getting a little bit messy, if I'm totally honest, and even knowing the context of the comic book, things are still a little bit confusing to follow. Ultimately, the group breaks into one big major fight, and Silver's reaction more or less sums up my own reaction as I try to understand a lot of what's happening at the moment. Fortunately for Sonic, Sonic manages to convince everyone to team up on Scourge, and then those like Silver or Metal can then deal with him later. Scourge retreats to his throne room, where it is revealed that his throne is made of Anarchy Barrel, that being Anti-Mobius' version of the Chaos Emeralds, and whereas in Mobius Prime there are only 7 Chaos Emeralds, here in Anti-Mobius there's a ton of Anarchy Barrels. So, using this Anarchy Barrel chair, Scourge turns himself into his super form, and ushers one of the coolest lines honestly in this entire comic book run. He then manages to beat everyone in his throne room rather effortlessly. While this is happening, back in Mobius Prime, the Freedom Fighters manage to reboot the Star Posts in order to save Sonic, and reluctantly, the Suppression Squad join as they believe that by now Scourge has surely been defeated. However, everyone arrives shocked to find a Super Scourge standing victorious over all of his foes. Both the Freedom Fighters and the Suppression Squad attempt to take down Scourge, but they, like everybody else, are defeated. However, this distraction gives Sonic some time to recover, and he ends up taking Scourge on head-to-head once again. Knowing that he's outmatched by Scourge in his super form, Sonic leads Scourge outside and buys his time until he finally convinces Scourge to turn back in order to have a fair fight. However, Scourge finds himself weakened after doing this, as the Anarchy Barrels have sapped his energy away after turning back from his super form. Sonic had banked on this happening, as the Chaos Emeralds leave him with a slight boost of energy after going super, so logic would dictate that in this opposite world, the Anarchy Barrels would have an inverse effect on Scourge. With Scourge in a weakened state, he's easily defeated, and once again, with the aid of Kintobor, the group manages to return to their home, and they hopefully leave Anti-Mobius in a better place than how they found it. Sonic, having had enough of Scourge finally, takes him with them. But instead of bringing him back to Mobius, he brings him to the Zone Jail, which is sort of like an interdimensional jail for all of the worst people out there. And for some reason, everybody from that dimension has the letter Z at the start of their name, such as Zonic or Zobotnik. With Scourge in prison, we actually come to an area that I personally like to consider to be the end of Scourge. Scourge would ultimately end up escaping prison, and he would begin plotting something with Dr. Fenitivus yet again, but we'd never actually get to see what exactly he was planning, as the Super Genesis wave would end up effectively creating a soft reboot which eliminated all of Ken Penders' characters, which despite not having actually created Scourge, Penders did create Anti-Sonic, who I guess one could argue is Scourge. And so because of that, along with many other characters, Scourge was erased during the Super Genesis wave. Personally, I like the idea of him being stuck in jail, plotting his way out and slowly buying his time, instead of leaving it on a cliffhanger. However, either way, it's a disappointing ending, and we'll never truly get a conclusion that we want out of it. With that being said, that's essentially Scourge's story in a nutshell. Now, with Scourge's story wrapped up with a nice bow on top, I thought it could be fun to throw in a fun fact. That being that, did you know that Scourge's color and his crown are based off of a visual glitch from Sonic 2 called the Ashura glitch? This glitch causes Sonic's colors to get all messed up, making him green with a black forehead, which was the inspiration for Scourge's color and the black crown that he wears. This also ties into Surge the Tenrec from the IDW comics, who is based on the same glitch, and honestly, I think is a very cool character design-wise. On top of that, a sort of neat thing that I had noticed while making this is that both Scourge and Jet the Hawk have a similar color design, and they're both supposed to be kind of like opposites to Sonic, but that doesn't really go anywhere, and I just thought it was an interesting observation more than anything. And with that, that's another video done. I hope you enjoyed it, and if there's anything else that you'd like to hear regarding different characters or different topics in general that you would be interested in, let me know in the comments, and be sure to like, subscribe, and do all that kind of stuff if you haven't already, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks. Once on the other side of the ring, Scourge and Rouge would meet Dr. I already forgot how to say his name. 1 second. Fenitivus. New Mega... In New Megalopolis? Jesus, I can't remember how to say this guy's name. Fenitivus. Did you know that his color and crown that he wears are actually a design that's based on a visual glitch from Sonic 2 called the Ashura glitch? That was such a bad read, holy